Hi everybody, my name is David Martins. I'm the director at the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition, and welcome to In the House Live, our ongoing conversation with different members of our community here in Vermont as we talk about the housing crisis that faces our state and solutions and kind of what's going on in that sector. And today I'm very excited to welcome Justin Cersic with us as our guest, and well, I'll let you kind of tell everybody. Justin is a AmeriCorps Vista who has been working at VAHC for the last year, almost exactly a year, right? Next week it'll be.
Yeah, it's going to be your anniversary.
And so we're very happy to have him. We have two Vistas that work with us, Justin and Grace. Grace couldn't be with us tonight, but so I thought that we might talk tonight, Justin, a little bit about first of all, to tell our viewers what AmeriCorps is. Why don't we start with that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, David. So like everyone said, like David said rather, my name is Justin Cersic. I'm the Resident Engagement and Outreach Coordinator, AmeriCorps Vista, with the Vermont Affordable Housing Coalition. Now, essentially what AmeriCorps does, through this really great program called Volunteers in Service to America, or VISTA, takes recent graduates and other folks, young Americans, and pairs them up with different nonprofit organizations across the country for what's called indirect service. So essentially, this involves building capacity for these organizations, whether it's through new programs, fundraising, communications, et cetera, to make sure that they are better able to serve the community. So in my case, I help do outreach and education for the coalition to spread the coalition's message and to make sure that folks are informed about what's going on at the State House in Montpelier in regards to affordable housing, what resources are available to them, and how large the affordable housing crisis is and what the problems are.
And you said volunteers in service to America, so we don't pay you. That we'll put out that confession right there,
Yeah.
right? VAHC does not pay you a salary.
The coalition does not pay me salary, though the coalition does pay me a decent housing stipend. AmeriCorps overall, the federal government, does provide a live-in stipend for the Vistas, which varies from region to region. So for the Chittenden County region of Vermont, it's about $1,500, though there's about to be a pay increase for the next group of Vistas that come in.
And that stipend does that stipend go directly to the landlord?
The housing stipend does, but the live-in allowance goes into the Vista's pocket so that they can pay their expenses from rent to insurance to groceries as best as they can.
It doesn't leave much, though, for an ice cream cone on a hot day.
Not really, no. Luckily, I'm in a good situation where I have a decent rent from a landlord who was a former AmeriCorps Vista and likes to rent out to AmeriCorps Vistas, but it's kind of difficult, especially when we look at what the fair market rent is in Vermont. And what an affordable rent is supposed to be, about 30% of your monthly income by HUD standards, Housing and Urban Development Agency. So with the rent that I have right now, it is affordable. But for most rentals that are available in this area, I wouldn't be able to afford them.
Yeah. No, of course. Now, so you apply for the position, right? It's not just something you sign up for. You have to apply for it. And so now I'll put you on the spot because I've never asked this, but was it only housing that you applied to? Or was that like the only thing you wanted to do? Or did you kind of apply to different kinds of service opportunities?
No, it wasn't. So I applied to multiple different VISTA opportunities, though I was very familiar with the coalition after having served in an internship over the summer a few years back with one of our partner organizations, CVOEO, the Champlain Valley Office of Economic Opportunity, where I worked a lot with the mobile home park community. So definitely affordable housing held a place in my heart after that work, which is why I was ultimately drawn to the coalition.
I'm certainly very glad that you and Grace both came to join us. We'll tell everybody at home that the coalition cannot function without the vital role that you all play. So, and you are not originally a Vermonter like me. You came here for VAHC. So, and you're originally from
New Jersey.
New Jersey. So it's all the same down there when you're from the Northeast.
A little bit.
From New Jersey. So you also had to do this housing hunt. I had a call just this week with someone from the media who wanted to talk about whether it was true or not that people are turning down job opportunities here because they can't find somewhere to live. And I said, oh, absolutely, it's true. It's a real, that's not just an anecdotal thing we say because it's because of the labor shortage. It's a real issue, right?
Yeah, it is. In fact, I do know that we had someone in my Americorps Vista class that had secured a position here in Vermont, and they're all ready to start volunteering, and they could not find housing, so ultimately they had to turn it down.
Good Lord. And now you had already started, did you get word about your place where you're living right away, or did you have to get in the weeds of that hunt?
It was a search in the weeds through various apartment rental websites and Facebook groups before I was able to find where I'm at right now.
Wow, good. Well, good for you. I saw a post today about, in one of the Facebook groups that deals with housing, talking about application fees as like that's one of the big scams out there. There's so many scams, fake posts, and then when you get to the real things, they're so expensive. I think that's generally how you can tell if it's real or not. If it's affordable, it's fake.
Yeah, that's for sure.
So you came on as to do resident organizing work, and so why don't you start by kind of telling us a bit about what does that even mean? Resident organizing, what is it?
Yeah, sure. So essentially, as far as the coalition is involved, resident organizing involves making sure that folks know their rights, know what's going on in Vermont, and are educated so that they can get involved, take action, contact our legislators, and ultimately try and affect and shape the landscape of affordable housing in this state. So initially, my project began with a series of in-person community meetings in Washington County with the idea that we would expand from county to county afterwards. However, that was a little stymied in the winter thanks to the Delta and Omicron variant of COVID-19. So eventually we shifted online to Zoom, and because of that online landscape, we did a statewide approach. And we really focused on educating folks about different policies and pieces of legislation that the Affordable Housing Coalition was advocating for in Montpelier at the State House, and how those bills might affect them if passed or if they don't pass. Just because sometimes that can be rather complicated, and sometimes when it comes to tax credits and things like that and financing, it can be difficult to understand how that is going to immediately affect me. So that's what we did throughout the entire legislative session until May when they ended. And right now, as you know, we moved on to a town hall format, which is actually fairly unique as compared to the community meetings.
Yeah, it is. And it's spoiler alert, everybody. I already knew how this how that story ends, obviously, because I'm his boss. But I was really struck by, in the course of us doing this work together as a coalition, and with you, because from our perspective, and as people who are kind of doing this work regularly, we think like, well, this is a wonderful opportunity. Right? Like we just, put this opportunity out there for people to gather and they can be heard, and to me, that's such a powerful, I would jump at any opportunity for my voice to be heard in the arena of like lawmakers, right? And like that, because it's really very true that my experience has been that legislators really want to hear from constituents. They want to hear, especially here it seems, they really do want to hear from Vermonters of every walk of life. And I think that even now, like talking to the candidates and people who are running for office, it seems that they're very much aware of the weight.
Yeah.
The weight of the office, the responsibility, and the fact that the discussions they have in those rooms and in those chambers affect the daily life of Vermonters. And so they want to hear from all Vermonters. And so I was really struck by that connection is not so obvious to everyone. That sometimes it's probably true for all of us, that we get so kind of stuck in our situations that it's hard to see how what happens in Montpelier impacts our everyday lives.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I can share too that generally there is a lot of apathy among folks in the community when it comes to getting involved and getting engaged with what happens at the State House and what happens in local government, just because of the pandemic, because of recent events. But your voice does matter, especially here in Vermont, with our citizen legislature that is built around being in touch, in step with the community, being involved and making sure that constituents are heard and that their voices are brought to the State House in the end, ultimately.
Yeah, I had some folks with the Omnibus housing bill this past session, this big housing bill, S226, that dealt with, and they heard so much about it in the media, and and folks, I think, when I talked to some folks about the bill, they seemed sort of disappointed. Like, it wasn't as exciting as they thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
With things like, permitting and Act 250, and I think that we sort of, for the average person just kind of going through life, they're like, well, I need an apartment and I'm paying way more than I can afford. How do we fix this? And the behind the scenes stuff, which so often is what is worked out in legislation, seems so disconnected from the tangible solution. I think that's why people turn out for things like, the Roe v. Wade stuff that just happened. People turn out for that. People turned out for things like marriage equality. People turn out for those big things, but things like, a bill that deals with water and wastewater connection is harder to get excited about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think definitely a lot of those larger issues are clear cut. They're still incredibly important. Mm-hmm. Housing is kind of a big mess, as you and I both know. There's a lot of history behind it, going back to the Reagan era, moving forward with how the government funded or didn't fund and then funded again housing, affordable housing. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of mechanisms to build more housing and lower prices and make sure that folks can be housed at a decent, reasonable price and have that dignity too.
Mm-hmm. Now, you also, I know, during your time with us, got involved with the VAHC's Manufactured Home Subcommittee. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the work that they do?
Yeah, I did. So initially, I actually got involved with that before I joined the coalition about 2 years ago during my internship with CVOEO, as I mentioned. I was a community liaison intern with their mobile homes program. And one of the goals of that internship was to work with community members and stakeholders to see how we could develop some type of advisory committee made up of nonprofit partners, residents of affordable housing communities, to work together to advocate for manufactured housing, which is one of the largest sources of unsubsidized affordable housing in Vermont and the United States. Mm-hmm. So our subcommittee of the coalition is made up of various organizations, various leadership from different organizations, as well as some leadership from different cooperative mobile home parks. So manufactured home communities that are all entirely owned by the residents. And so the residents control the prices and the rents to guarantee that folks don't get unduly evicted, which can be a real problem in mobile home parks because the mobile part is a real misnomer. It costs a lot of money to lift those homes off of the land that you rent and move them. And oftentimes these homes are so old that the foundation and the structure would just fall apart if you tried to move it to begin with. Mm-hmm. So that can be a real issue.
Do we kind of lead the way in Vermont in a sense when it comes to the co-ops, or is that kind of the cooperative model, or is that kind of the going thing?
So I know across New England that's a very big thing, but Vermont is one of the leaders in it too, in the cooperative model. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to everything from supermarkets to apartments to mobile home parks.
Yeah, I think it's fantastic. I think that it builds community, I think, in a lot of important ways, and such great important work.
Yeah.
You mentioned that we've switched to the town hall model for our community meetings, and this backstory for those of you who are watching. We have a big turnover in the State House this year, and there's a real and Justin, you hear me say all the time that if someone's running for office this year and they do not include housing as one of the items on their platform, then they are not intelligent enough to run for office, because it's just such an issue. If you're running for office and you're not talking about it, like, you're out of luck. But so everybody's talking about it, and as we've already said, it's such a complicated issue that, and the wonderful part of our legislature is that these policymakers are everyday Vermonters who stand up and say, I want to represent my community. And just like any other Vermonter may not know all the ins and outs of housing, just becoming a lawmaker doesn't magically inform you, right? So we've put together these town halls by region to invite candidates to talk to their potential constituents, our membership, that kind of a thing, so that they can learn about housing. How do you think they're going so far?
I think, like I said before, it's been a really unique program and special program. So a lot of these town hall events that you hear about as the elections are ongoing are all about meet the candidates, meet the candidates, meet the candidates. But this event is really the candidates meeting you. So it's really a great opportunity for candidates to come, instead of giving a stump speech or saying why you should vote for them to hear directly from our members, our nonprofit housing organizations and service providers, and regular everyday Vermonters who will be their constituents about the issues they face, the questions they have. And it's a great place for candidates themselves to ask questions because, again, like you said, not everyone knows everything about housing. It's very complex, especially me when I first started. It really was a boot camp to get caught up to speed.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I know. I'm still in it, I think, in the boot camp. Yeah, no, I agree. And I think what's really struck me about the town halls is how eager and really humble the candidates are that are running for office. I think a lot of times when you think of, well, Joe is running for whatever, town dog catcher, we assume that there's this stereotype about politicians, right? And that there is sort of some arrogance and some, not at all the case here. It hasn't been my experience at all. The people here who are running for office have been really very proactive about reaching out, about asking questions and saying, I want to be educated and about this issue. I want to learn more. And I just think that's fantastic and speaks to the values of Vermont, I think.
Definitely, and it's been the same across every region and political party in Vermont too.
Yep.
That everyone really wants, they just want to know. So.
Yep, absolutely. And I think it's been interesting seeing some of the, folks can register on the website, and they register as a constituent or a member or a candidate.
And that's www.vtaffordablehousing.org/outreach.
So sign up.
Little plug there.
And right there on the website, you can see what day your region is meeting on. But a lot of times folks will shoot me an email, particularly the candidates, and they'll say, oh, well, I went to the website to register for my region, but I can't make it that night because I have this or I have that. But I want to know more. And so, they'll schedule a time to talk to me, or they'll send in their questions directly. And I'm just really, really impressed by how seriously, how just serious they are about learning about it. That's really, I think, very, very telling. Because I think if I learned one thing in the legislature last year, it's that there's no magic bullet. There's no one solution. I was talking to a representative yesterday. We were having coffee, and we were saying, this housing crisis took 30 years to get to where we are. We didn't keep up with housing. We didn't keep up with this. We didn't keep up with that. There's different attempts for the government at different levels then a pandemic. We would be fools to think we can just stroll into Montpelier and in one biennium fix it. Just fix this problem that we've been causing for decades, that we can just fix it overnight. And so it's a slow and steady work.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the coalition has been around since the mid-'80s. So it's been constant work with constant progress to get to where we are. So sometimes it's a few steps forward and a few steps back. But ultimately, especially after this historic year that we had at the State House with tremendous investments into housing, it's very exciting to see what Vermont is going to do.
I always think of Gus Seelig from VHCB, who said, we were talking when I first took this role, we were talking about all the investments from the year before that the legislature had put into housing, and he said, my concern is that this year the legislators are going to say, well, we already invested, hundreds of millions of, into this. Why is this still an issue? Why isn't it just fixed, And he said, and the answer to that is that the problem is so big that hundreds of millions is an investment. It's the down payment on resolving this problem. And that's really mind-blowing to really think about, and that even if we had all the money in the world, there's all these other dynamics too that it's not even a problem that can be solved with money. Money helps, but it's not going to be entirely solved with money.
Yeah,
it's
definitely.
very, very kind of poignant. I wonder what your thoughts are about, there was the point in time? What's the report that just came out?
The out of reach.
Out of reach. I knew point in time is a couple months ago. Anyway, the out of reach report looking at the housing issue across the country. And I don't know about you, when you read it, but when I read it, I thought, whoa, that really puts quite a sharp light on.
It does, yeah. So as you know, that report is conducted every year by the National Low Income Housing Coalition. And it looks state by state, community by community, to look strictly at the numbers on what the affordable housing crisis looks like in every state and every community. And overall, for Vermont, so what they do is they look at the fair market rent. So essentially, kind of an average of what rents are going for 1-bedroom, 2-bedroom apartments, and what they should look like. Which oftentimes, if you look at that and compare it to like Zillow or Rent.com, it doesn't really match up. Those prices are a little bit more expensive. They tend to be. But it also does something which is really cool, which it looks at wages to see what an affordable housing wage would be for an average Vermonter for a 2-bedroom apartment, for instance. So it essentially assumes that you're working 40 hours a week, right? And then it takes the fair market rent, it takes your salary, and it looks to see what you can afford if you pay 30% of your monthly wages, which is what is considered affordable by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. So in Vermont, that's about $23 an hour is the affordable housing wage. Meanwhile, the minimum wage in Vermont, we've taken a lot of steps compared to some other states and the federal government, but it's only $12.55. So you have to work essentially 1.5 full-time jobs, 1 to 2 jobs, to be able to afford rent and then be able to adequately pay for other things like gas, a car, insurance, healthcare, education, food.
And gas prices are crazy, and I know I can't get out of the grocery store under $100. I mean, there's just no way to do it. And I think that we often talk about, like I'll go visit, when I'm visiting with my parents, sometimes we'll talk about the cost of something, and my dad will say, I remember when, such and such only cost such and such, or,
Yep.
And we hear that all the time from the generations ahead of us.
I've gotten at least 2 phone calls from my grandma over the past year asking me how much I paid for groceries, comparing that to back in her day.
And I'm sure that like the generation before them paid even less for all these things, and I think that it's easy to kind of like brush that off as like, well, every generation says that. But I think that what the Out of Reach report, which is appropriately named, highlights is that this is a tangible, real, this is not just anecdotal, that this is absurd. I remember when in my bartending days, a lifetime ago, I was in my very early 20s and had applied for this job that was advertised as a marketing manager. And I applied for the job, I got it. Well, it turned out to be door-to-door sales. And you walk around, sell these coupon books, and they had this whole kind of algorithm of how to make, all this money. And so I remember the first couple of weeks, the first week I finally went out on my own, and after the whole week of hoofing it around all these neighborhoods in the middle of nowhere, Massachusetts, in the snow, and I had $100 was what I made. And I remember I went to the manager and I said, I can't keep this role. I need to make more money. And he said, well, what are you paying in rent? And at the time, I was paying $400 a month. I think my total rent was $800, and I had one roommate. I said, well, $400 a month. And he said, well, they say if you can make, that you should make, I don't remember what his math was, but the bottom line was that your rent should be a quarter of your income. That was his argument.
Which is
quarter.
less than the HUD standards.
Yeah, and I thought, okay, and like now, but I look back now and think, first of all, I think, wow, I was only paying $800 a month for rent. Like, that's phenomenal. And just, I think part of what's frightening about all of it is how fast all these things have increased. Because in my own lifetime, and I'm older than you, but I'm not that old. It's shocking how fast the numbers have gone up, and it's really disproportionate and really really very alarming.
Yeah.
So as you come to the end of your Vista service year, what would you say is probably the most valuable thing you've learned about housing, or the most valuable thing you're taking with you?
That's a very good question. I think I can touch into some of the things we were talking about as we were talking about the town hall meetings of candidates. It's that really when it comes down to the state and local level, some of the party lines that you see and the divides at the federal level, at the national level, don't really exist, and people are more willing, especially when it's not all about what's on cable news or Twitter, to work together on issues to improve the life of average everyday Vermonters. Now, granted, there are going to be some disagreements, but for the most part, there's been a lot of collaboration at the State House, and it's been really nice to see that as you do your work there, and also to see that through the town hall meetings of folks from either side, progressives, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, really come together to acknowledge that housing is an issue that needs to be solved.
And now, as your year comes to an end, what's the plan? Are you going to flee Vermont for cheaper rent somewhere else, or are you stepping out into the
No, for some
rental
reason,
world?
I thought that the snow was going to drive me away and the negative 20-degree temperatures, but actually I'm kind of getting drawn in. So I'm definitely still on the lookout, but I'm very eagerly awaiting interviews that are going to take place. And I'm hoping to stay in Vermont, if not go elsewhere for other opportunities.
And now that you're stepping out into, I'm guessing you're starting to look at apartments and what's out there.
I was just doing that today, yeah.
Has it gotten any better since a year ago, or?
So definitely some of the salaries that I've been looking at, a lot better than the AmeriCorps stipend, so that's been helpful. However, the rents are also pretty high too, to the point where it might be 40% of my monthly salary, so 10% above the HUD standard.
Have they come down at all?
It's been pretty stagnant, I have to tell you. So I think hopefully by looking at roommates and other opportunities that come up, that I'll be able to find something.
Yeah.
So
I'll tell you, every once in a while, I'll go on and look, not because I'm really looking to live anywhere different. I very much like where I am, but I'll look sometimes just see what's out there, and my lease was about to be renewed, and so I said, well, let me see what's out there. And I thought, to be honest with you, I thought it was a little bit worse than it was a year ago. I mean, there was more, maybe it's just because I have a better eye now for the scams, but I just thought, this is unbelievable. I'm still struck by how many they'll show a living room with this beautiful view of a city out the window, and then it'll be a city view. What city? What skyline is that? That's not real.
yeah,
and it's amazing how many, just how many scams and fake posts there are, and it's really very alarming. And are you hoping to continue to stay in the housing world?
I would love to, because affordable housing has definitely held a place in my heart, though I'm looking to expand and go wherever opportunities take me. But especially since affordable housing will continue to affect me for most of my young adult career, for most of my professional career, it's a concern. So I would love to stay involved.
And I think, especially if you're going to live in Vermont, unless you end up rich, it's always going to be a concern. And then, do you have any thoughts about the long term, with the trajectory of kind of where you're heading beyond that?
Gosh, that's hard to think about right now. But I think I definitely want to stay with community engagement and outreach to make sure that folks know the resources that are available to them, that they receive the education that's out there, and that they're able to get involved with local government, state government, and bills and legislation and policies that really affect them.
Super. Well, thank you, Justin. Thank you for joining us in the House today. Thank you for your service to VAHC, and I know I speak and for you and Grace. Grace, if you're watching at home from your sick bed, that wherever I know I speak for all of our members when I say how grateful we are for both of you and your work and your service, and really just invaluable. And for those of you who are watching at home, wherever you live in the state, please visit our website, register for the town hall for your region. If you're welcome to register for any of them, but it's a great opportunity to inform the folks that will be representing you in Montpelier about the struggles that Vermonters are facing right in your neighborhood. So by all means, register, check it out, and follow our website to keep up with all the happenings at VAHC. And with that, we'll see you, or you'll see us, I should say, in 2 months. So thank you for joining us. And Justin, thank you.
Thank you, David.